Hello, hoping we are live now and people can listen to us carefully. And thank you everyone for joining us for this workshop, continuous delivery workshop, strategizing continuous delivery for engineering leaders. So if you have seen any trouble, glitches in voice or screen sharing or anything, please do let us know in the chat. So we'll be monitoring all these kind of activities. Make sure you have a pleasant experience when you actually listening and watching to us from YouTube or different other places as well. So without any further delay, let me start a discussion, give you some quick glimpses of what we're actually trying to cover today. So as of October 16, we are hosting a workshop on strategizing continuous delivery for engineering leader. So this has three parts into it. Basic of continuous delivery for engineering leaders. Part two, we'll be learning about managing continuous delivery culture with open source. And part three is continuous innovation. So I have a wonderful guest speaker with me. So I will straight go ahead to Garima Bajpai. Hello, Garima. Can you give us a quick intro of yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Garima Bajpai. I'm based out of Ottawa, Canada. I'm founder for the DevOps community of practice here in Canada, which has several chapters: Ottawa, Toronto, Edmonton, Atlantic provinces. Also, producer for Summits Canada and the chair for the Ambassador Program for Continuous Delivery Foundation. And I've published a couple of books. My call to action is leadership practices and communities, and that's why we are here. And I will talk more about it during this workshop. Thank you.
Ah, awesome. Thank you very much, Garima, for your introduction. I'm now go to Paweł Piwosz. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. So over to
Yes,
you
perfect.
now, Paweł. So give us a good
Yes.
intro.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Paweł Piwosz and I'm based in Poland, in Krakow. Together with Garima, we are both the Foundation ambassador. Well, Garima is the chair. I am just a simple ambassador. Also, DevOps Institute ambassador, Docker captain, and AWS community builder. My main focus is around clouds and DevOps. I'm running the very unpopular DevOps channel on YouTube, and together with Garima, we are like a half of the representation of half of the people who are writing this book, which you see on the screen right now. CI/CD design patterns will be available soon. You can or pre-order it right now already. So yeah, we try to cover as much as we can in this short time we have. So let's hope we will be able to do it.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your quick intro. People who are actually listening to us and watching us from the different places, use the QA tab channel for your questions. I will be actually interrupting as we go and ask Karima to and Paweł to actually help us navigate as well. So feel free to drop your question in the QA chat section. And in any case, if you feel some interruption in the chats or anything. And there's also a link available for you that's called DevOps Compatibility Indicator. A form is actually you can see right now on your screen. You can actually click the link in there and you fill out some of your things you actually want. And Garima will tell you more about it as well. So with that, without any further delay, over to you, Garima, and I will be monitoring all the question and any activities behind the scene as well. Over to you now.
Thank you, Sam. And we have very short time, so obviously, what we do is we start with some kind of a leadership narrative. And if you can flip the slide a little bit. Um, so, have you ever thought about the state of art of software development in 6 years from now, 2030 and beyond? Yes, it's only 6 years, 2030. So, what will be the state of art practices of software development? How CI/CD would change or transform? Have you ever thought about it? How will Gen AI participate in shaping up the future of software engineering? What will be the major problems and challenges by then? And how do we reach there? What kind of problems and challenges we face now? And what will be the visionary ideas for overcoming those problems and challenges? Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball at our hand. We probably don't promise to answer all these questions during this conversation. But what we promise to leave you with is some thought provoking questions and some answers to these questions. So, if you go a little further on the slide, I'll start this with quoting the greatest leaders of our times in software development and delivery. So, NVIDIA CEO is talking about software is eating the world, but AI is going to eat software. Obviously, we also have an extension of this thought that if our jobs is to create computing technology such that nobody has to program, and that the programming language is human. And this is again extension of NVIDIA's CEO. Yes, in future, AI will be disintermediate coding, making the skills largely irrelevant. And to extend this thought, I would also present the views of AWS CEO, which was in June. I'm quoting, quote unquote, if you go forward 24 months from now or some amount of time, I cannot exactly predict where it is. And it is possible that most of the developers are not coding. So does it tell you a story of the revolution which we are planning to have in the next 5 years? Do you think that you are accountable for the change you're bringing to the community as leaders? And we will instrument this change during this 1 hour workshop and see how the leaders of continuous delivery play a very, very vital and important role. Also extending this thought that how open source technology will induce and inject a lot of emerging technology into the software development space so that the software development ecosystem becomes more accessible to the communities. So if you go further down the slide, obviously, if we talk about this change, this large transformation which is going to happen, continuous delivery plays a vital, pivotal role in it. And anyone who has a seat at the table when, let's say, DevOps technologies was transforming the landscape of software development, you would appreciate that how difficult it was to get investment buy-ins or buy-in from the leadership point of view, and how the investment should be triggered in DevOps technologies or CI/CD, for example. So their narration has to change. We need to take more accountability as leaders in how we transform the landscape for software development, and how do you bring continuous delivery as at a pivotal transformation standpoint where continuous delivery becomes a critical decision maker. It is seen as a culture curator, which enables collaboration. Continuous delivery also is acting as a change driver in many of the organizations. Continuous delivery Continuous delivery enables collaboration as well as introduce new business models or new partnership models, right? And lastly, it uncovers new capabilities, creative ideas. It acts as a growth catalyst in many cases. And what we have seen in the starting of this conversation, that the transformation of software delivery, how we code, how we develop our software, and how inclusive we are in terms of creating that development ecosystem for future. Continuous delivery will play a pivotal role in the developing the new methods of working. So now I think we are at a stage where we can go into the next step of this conversation. If you can move on. So I will leave this to Pavel to elaborate a little
Yeah.
bit more that, what is required from here and now, and why this change is requiring a lot of leadership thought process. So over to you, Pavel.
Yeah, thank you, Garima. So yeah, continuing what Garima said about importance of continuous delivery of the whole CI/CD process. Why it is important? Imagine that you have the producer of food and you have you as like a consumer of food, but there is nothing what can deliver this food from the producer to consumer. You are just, you will starve, right? The same is here. You have to have something what will deliver the code from the developer to the production to the customers. And this is done through CI/CD. CI/CD plays crucial role here, as Garima already said, and is the most vital part of the software body. It's like a bloodstream, which delivers everything to every single part of your body. That is why it is very important to take like more care than we do now about this process, and see it not like just simple pipeline, but more complicated thing to manage. Because think about this as something what will grow, something what will scale, something what must deliver in the proper speed with the proper quality, and so on and so on and so on. But to set the stage, I'd like to say like two small definitions of CI/CD. So first of all, where CI ends and CD starts. You may think this is a very simple question, why I'm asking this. Well, I've done a lot of interviews and I know it is not that simple. I mean, the question is simple, but answer is not necessary. So CI ends when you create your artifact and you store this artifact somewhere. And that's it. And CD starts with taking this artifact and start working with it, right? So this is the one definition which I want to set. And the second, what is the difference between CD and CD? So it means between continuous delivery and continuous deployment. So they are very similar. The only one difference, the only one, but so significant, is that continuous delivery has some, let's call it manual elements, right? It may be test, it may be the decision about the approval, and so on and so on. Continuous deployment is fully automated process. So if you think about delivering with the speed, like for example mentioned AWS has, every couple of seconds something is delivered through the CI/CD in their organization, you probably should forget about continuous delivery because you will, simply speaking, you will not have the time to accept everything. All right, so Garima already said about a couple of structural and organizational elements which are very important for us here to understand and to manage, because software development is, as I said, one big body, right? And in this body we have, or let's have a little bit different vision. I don't know how many of you are a fan of Star Trek. I am, so that's why having this star chart here, we have couple of empires, right? Couple of kingdoms, couple of republics, and so on and so on and so on. And this is what we have in our organization as well, right? We have people who are responsible for security. We have people who are responsible for developing the code, for managing the application on the deployed environments, and so on and so on and so on. And those, all of these countries, these areas must work together. And our goal as our leaders is also to ensure this communication is clear, clean, kind. I'm sorry, but it has to be kind, and effective. Okay, and also we have to be careful, because if we create something what we can call like a over communication, it will go into wrong direction. So here the thing for you to search in the web is something what is called Conway's law. What it is, how it works, and why this is very important for us as leaders to maintain and to have this Conway's law in the mind. And now, I said already about scaling CI/CD, and this is very important, because how we think about CI/CD, it's a pipeline, right? Somewhere in the Jenkins or Azure DevOps or whatever, just one pipeline, maybe 10, or maybe 100, or maybe 10,000 of pipelines. Are you able to manage one pipeline in the same way like you manage 10,000 pipelines, or in the opposite direction? This is the question, right? And I heard recently, really recently, I heard that we are not able, there is no way to manage 200 pipelines. Like, really? I mean, if you approach to the problem properly, it is the possibility, but we have to start from the really from the beginning. For example, how we do the branching strategy, because we can have simple branching strategy like trunk, which is basically very simple. It's not the time for explaining what trunk is and so on and so on. In this picture you see it's very simple, right? Or we can have something a little bit more complicated like Git flow. So you already see the difference between those two, right? It's a little bit more complicated. And now imagine that you have a system where you have multiple microservices. By multiple, I think about 1,000, why not, right? And all of them have their own approach to the branching. This means you have mess. You don't know exactly where those teams are with the coding. All right, so you finally can control. You have long paper and you have every single team written down, and you know what kind of strategy they have with the code, how to approach them, to understand where they can deploy, and so on and so on. But then they decided to go with part of the teams with blue-green deployment. What means that generally you have 2 copies of your whole infrastructure, which you split. So you have the blue part, and this is the version 1 of your application. Then you have to correlate, organize the deployment of the new applications into version 2 and split, and like not split, but take the traffic from version 1 to version 2 of the application in one moment. So half of your teams are doing this, but the rest of the teams is very modern. They are going with the flow, with the newest approach, and they have canary deployment, or like in this example, they have rolling deployment, right? So they don't switch between 2 different infrastructures. They update the application on existing infrastructure. And now the question which I very like really to ask now is, what can go wrong? Because one team is doing this and second team is doing that. How can you correlate those deployments together? The short answer, and I'm sorry to spoil the fun, but the short answer is you cannot. Because there are 2 completely different ways of doing things. And now, if you have the application which contains like 10 microservices, probably you are able to manage it somehow. But don't get me wrong, but you are not able to do it with 100, 200, and so on and so on. And before we jump even further, there is one step between those elements, because the coding and branching strategy is the beginning of the story, and deployments are the end of the story. Something is in between, right? What it is? Mainly testing. And now, how we approach testing is critical for the performance and effectiveness of our process. Because we have tests like unit tests, which are very fast to develop and to execute, very cheap to develop, and also there is a lot of elements, a lot of problems we can find using those unit tests as early as possible. And we should use them as early as possible because they are fast and cheap. Simple like that. From the other side, we have end-to-end tests, which are kind of extensive, slow, and expensive tests, because those tests are testing the whole platform, the whole application with all the components, with all third-party connectivities, and so on and so on and so on. And it will be very bad to not have unit tests and start end-to-end tests and find that in your code 2 + 2 is 5. This is something what should be catched as early as possible, because this is like in the code logic, right? Not the behavior of the whole application. To give you even bigger example, imagine that you work for example, for NASA, and you have your satellite done. All software is on the satellite. NASA is doing the final test just before the launch, and then you realize that your software, your code is giving 5 from 2 + 2. I don't even imagine how many millions are burned now, right? That's why this is very important to understand where you should run which test. And again, it should be like constant throughout the whole organization, because this gives you the understanding and a quick picture, let's call it this way, where you are. And those 3 are just the examples. We have couple tests more. So here you have like a table which can show you how many tests you can have in your pipelines, in your value stream, really, right? And all of those tests can act as a quality gate for you and decision points. I will come to decision points somewhere else, somewhere later. And so this is the one element. But the another element is how we put those things together with the connection to the control points, right? So like here, how we design the process, right? So we have a couple of repositories, we have developers, then we have version control system. We should have feedbacks on which the point of the chain we have those feedbacks, to whom those feedbacks are sent, what are the escalation paths. We love escalations, right? Especially managers, but the developers love escalations as well. But this is very important element as well, because if you have, it's like from Harry Potter, you can know dark magic, but you don't need to use it. It's your will, right? So you should have the escalation paths, but also hope do not use them. But when you need them, you have them. Simple like that. Then how and which environments you have, how you deploy to them, what are the quality gates between those environments, what kind of third-party elements or the external connectivities you have. Like in this example, you have software composites analysis, you have static analysis, static security analysis, you have some storage where you store the artifacts, you have some test system, you have the dynamics testing. All of those components should be managed in complex way, but in one place, because there are more elements to that which are very important. For example, to give you a very simple example, if you have multiple teams and all of those teams are using different tools, there is very small possibility really to like switch people between different teams, because they have to learn whole stuff from the beginning. This is the one point. Second point is also connected with money. Imagine that you have 10 teams and 5 of them are using software X, which is paid, and the second 5 is using software A, which is also paid, and both are doing the same thing. You pay twice. Why? Right? So these elements are also important from the business perspective. And now this whole introduction, let's call it this way, leads us to very simplistic pipeline. And this is really very simplistic pipeline, right? We collect the code, we do the unit test, we do the build of, for example, Docker container, we check this build and we store it somewhere. One pipeline, simple, nice, done, right? We can go home. But then we have a little bit more of the pipelines, and all of them are doing the same. Fine, it works, right? It's perfect, but it can function very well. Imagine right now that you have like 10 times more of this, and you decided to change something in one of these blocks, for example, in check build. Now you need to spread it through all of them. So you go to the another pipeline, you change it here, you change it here, you change it here, you change it here, and somewhere here on the almost last one, you realize that there is a new version which you have to put here, because it took you a month to be in this place. Why? Because you don't have something what is critical, crucial for scaling your CI/CD approach. And this is modularity, because with modularity, you have something like that. And then you change something in one module, and you can easily populate it through all pipelines. This is the one benefit of this. Second, this is managed like in the separation of the whole pipeline, right? So this is the same way how we approach to properly defined Terraform or infrastructure as code approach. You have your business layer, where we say, for example, for the environment called dev, we need to use 2 instances of our virtual machine, but for environment called prod, we have to have 20, right? And then you have your technical part, which say, all right, this is the code to create virtual machine, and how many times I have to create this machine, it is taken from the business logic, right? And the same thing, the same modularity we create here. And even more, it can be different team which works with these modules here. Probably the term platform engineering is saying something to you, right? So very often we can see that the platform engineering teams are responsible for managing the modules which we are using in different elements of our work, right? And this is not all, because with this complexity, also we need to think about very important thing for guys which we developers hate. I mean security people. And this is the access management. So we also need to have proper approach and proper logic and proper separation for our design of access control, right? Having this airbags, so role-based access model, will give you the possibility to control only this part of the code, only this part of the pipelines, which you have to control, right? And right, we have in the middle at this point, but I think I'm on time, so we can go into open source.
Thank you, Paweł. And I think the whole idea for producing this workshop was to get you thinking about the role and the accountability you as leaders and us as like community evangelists have in transforming. And obviously continuous delivery plays a very, very crucial role. How do you scale continuous delivery also is extremely important. And putting these structures and governance in place is cannot be overlooked. I think this would also, you by this conversation, you will also be able to understand that what can be the next steps in the evolution of continuous delivery. And one of the pivotal next steps would be the use of open source technology in continuous delivery. And if you get to the next slide, I would again, if you're not hiding beneath a rock, you would know that how open source influence has been growing on continuous delivery. So we have put some kind of, success stories. So Kubernetes, and there is an excellent YouTube video, which is a documentary on Kubernetes, which can provide you more perspective that how this Kubernetes story grew so large and what kind of key elements of leadership you can learn from there. GitOps, for example, is another similar story. And what is the business value of GitOps? And there's another YouTube link, which we can also post in the chat. Open telemetry is another excellent example where there was many organizations or many enterprises, large enterprises came together to develop that story. Moving forward, I think it explains a little bit of the contribution of open source communities in continuous delivery landscape. Now, why we should invest in open source project for continuous delivery, and this is again a question which comes from a leadership community. I think it's a question of whether you want to actively consume open source or rather be passive about it. Because according to an open source security and risk analysis report, 90% of the scan code base contain open source. 76% of code base was open source. So obviously it's a question of, ignoring what you have or, striving for leadership in that space. Obviously, why open source is answer to so many questions is again the pace of innovation. So the pace of innovation is no longer discrete, but it's continual, right? And it's changing as we speak. So open source becomes a differentiator for organizations. And how do you find synergies? with open source and your developer community. So there are different roles and different initiatives which are available for reference. So we have put like the developer experience part and the developer relationship part. If you are looking for like how to develop and foster this link with or synergy with the community within the open source communities, these are like a good starting point for any organization or any leader. If you go further down into the next slide, I would also highlight that open source, of course, as we alluded, that open source software is embedded seamlessly in every software product nowadays, with 94 million developers on GitHub and more than 400 million open source contributions in 2022. And I think it has grown multifold from there with Gen AI, Coding Buddy, and, all those kind of initiatives which are growing as we speak. So I think these numbers are a little bit behind, but I do believe that you get the gist of this conversation, that there's a lot of traction of integrating open source into continuous delivery. And if you look at like what are the biggest trends, where open source community contribution have influenced the deliveries most, is the contribution in the infrastructure as code space. Also, initiating open source program office, or OSPO, is another contributor to it, and commercially backed OSS projects. And to name a few, like Kubernetes delivery ecosystem has a lot of these projects which are being adopted as we speak. So Paweł, I guess you have some more like slides and perspective on what kind of projects, let's say, we are hosting on like Kubernetes Delivery Foundation, and we can talk a little bit more about the new projects and the projects which are kind of at a maturity stage. What kind of key considerations we follow as leaders when we talk about open source, integration of open source into continuous delivery? So I've highlighted 3 points here, and obviously it's only like touching the tip of the iceberg. So the first and foremost point is sustainability of identified projects and communities. And here we see that contribution from, let's say, CDF and CNCF is playing a very important role, because it also helps to kind of foster, community collaboration and to a certain extent sustainability of the identified projects and communities. Addressing the supply chain security gap, so that is also very, very important aspect when choosing an open source technology integration into your CI/CD pipeline. And the third part would be embracing contributors as partners and creating that innovation ecosystem, right? So many of us are already part of like open source communities and projects, and we believe that there is a substantial amount of DNA change in the culture. How do we treat your developer community? How do you foster that collaboration? How do you co-create in that innovative ecosystem? And lastly, I would say value-driven integration, which can provide you like economic benefits, because anything what you do, I think it has to have a larger business goal. So with that, I hand it over to Paweł for next steps in your journey with open source.
Yes, sure. Thank you. And you said very important things here about open source. And please think about open source about like something what is not like danger for you. It's more the opportunity for you, because I'm not saying that closed software is bad. No, no, no. Don't get me wrong. But when the closed software is created, from this point, it starts to or tries to follow the trends. With open source, you can create those trends. This is the one thing. Second thing is that if you don't have something in open source software which you need, you can just contribute to it. And it's simple like that. And the third thing is that you don't need to be developer to contribute into open source. The documentation, the processes, the people who are finding the typos in documentations, those people are also important for the community. So don't be like shy and don't think that you are not needed there. Probably you can find some source for you to work with. And I'm very often laugh that when I hear that company says, no, we will not use open source. No, it's not our company policy. We don't use open source. And when you look on them, they are all using Linux. And what Linux is, the open source project, right? What kernel is in Linux is open source project. And if this is not enough, Kubernetes is the, I think, most known open source project today. How many of those companies are using Kubernetes? And even Jenkins, right? So this is also the element which we need to remember. And now I'd like to show you a little bit what kind of projects and how many of them really you can find. So I will start with Linux Foundation because this is the first, like the top hat on everything, right? And under Linux Foundation, we have you can find Linux Foundation under linuxfoundation.org, and we have multiple other foundations which are doing a lot of good work and a lot of projects. So for example, kernel is under Linux Foundation, right? So we have also the companies which are contributing, so you can find kind of well-known companies here and also projects and so on and so on and so on. Then we have like children of Linux Foundation, right? And one of those children is CD Foundation, right? And what kind of projects we can find here? For example, CD events probably will not tell you much, but the next one already should be familiar to you, right? The name Jenkins. So this is still, some will like it, some will not, but still the most popular CI/CD tool which we can use in order to deliver those pipelines, which I mentioned before. Then we have a little bit modern Jenkins X, we have Ortelius, we have Screwdriver, we have Spinnaker, we have Tecton, right? So those projects are related here under this foundation, are related to continuous delivery. And this is a little bit unfortunate because continuous delivery is also like a definition of the process, but also the definition of the whole thing, right? Here, as a big part of software delivery, right? So we have these projects which are currently under the Continuous Delivery Foundation. We have a couple of former projects. And when you look on this, it's quite let's say small amount of tools comparing with CNCF, but CNCF is much bigger and contains much more projects in different areas. Some of them are also related to CI/CD, but not always. And CNCF, which is the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, create something what is very helpful for all people around to know more about open source landscape. And here we have something what is called Cloud Native Landscape. It is under landscape.cncf.io, and we can find here a lot of different projects. Those big boxes are for projects which are curated by CNCF. Rest of them are the projects which are like recommended. So don't get me wrong, it's not all like open source projects in the world. It's only those which are known by CNCF and recommended by them. So it is like a fraction. So here we have multiple sections. For example, application definition and image build, and we have here Helm, we have here Backstage, KubeVirt, and so on and so on and so on, and many more, right? We have continuous integration and delivery, and here we have, for example, Argo, also a very well-known tool to create pipelines and create the delivery systems for your Kubernetes environments, right? We have also streaming, we have databases, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And also what Garima mentioned is infrastructure as code. And this is quite important because yes, we have approaches. For example, from AWS, we have CloudFormation, right? Which is the tool which belongs to AWS. But the most popular infrastructure as code tool today is Terraform. And Terraform is not fully open source, but still it is under some like flavor of open source. Let's say we have OpenTofu, which is completely open source. We have a couple more approaches which are open source. What means that you can take the core system of Terraform, for example, and create your own functional fork of it if you wish. You can create your own provider for your own needs if you wish, or you can just, simply speaking, use this. And Terraform is, I believe it's around 70-80% of all infrastructure as code use cases, Terraform is used. So you can see now how popular is one tool there. Of course, we can't say that open source doesn't have the things which we should consider, and maybe not as a risk, but as a potential point to control. Let's call it this way. What can it be? For example, who is the maintainer? How many people maintain the project? What is the license? This is very important. Of course, we are not lawyers here, but there are some, small things which change everything, right? How the activity in the project looks like, right? These are the factors which should help you to make the decision if you want to select this tool or another tool, because there is always an option. So these are very important aspects of open source. And one of the open source tools, except which we already saw here, from the continuous delivery foundation, which we can use in our daily basis work, is GitHub and GitHub Actions, really. So all of the actions which we have in GitHub are really open source, right? So you can go there, you can use them, you can modify them, and so on and so on and so on. You can create your own. And the beauty of this is that you have this CI/CD approach. Kind of simplistic, yes, I can agree, because it's not like a separate dedicated tool for CI/CD, but still very powerful if you know how to use them. And you can use it together with your code. You don't need to have any specifics like separated connectivities between them. You'll simplify your tool set, right? And as I always say, the beauty is in simplicity. So the simplest solution is better than the more complicated. And we DevOps has the tendency to overcomplicate things. How we can use it? We have here the action. So I don't have the working action here in this repository, but here you can create the pipelines. Here you have the building blocks. You remember when I told you about modularization? Here are the building blocks you can use in all your pipelines, and they will execute the stuff the same way always, right? And here in this repository, which you already saw on the screen, and the link will be there once again soon, you can find also how to use open source in continuous delivery and how to work with them with the examples of the pipelines. You can find it somewhere in the chapters. I will not help you where, because I want you to spend time in this repository to find the things by yourself. All right, so let's come back to the presentation, if I find it. Here it is somewhere. Okay, here. Right, so having open source in the organization doesn't mean that you are losing something. The thing which you probably will not have with open source is this level of support from the big companies or big organization or big, very expensive software. But you have the whole community of people who are backing up these projects. And it's the general consensus that the updates, changes, the modern approaches are implemented faster by the community than by the closed software, because this is how it works. Really, it's not bad or good thing. This is how it works, and you can really enjoy having being part of the open source community, because you can feel this, that you are doing something significant, right? Even if this is small contribution to the tool. Okay, so now we can go, I think, to the final part, which we have. So what is the evolution? What is the future of the CI/CD, and why it is important to have this base, which we spoke for 40 minutes right now, to go further, right? So Garima, it's your time.
Yeah. So if you go further down one slide, so obviously we have come a full circle, right? So we started where the state-of-art software development practices would be in 2030, 6 years from now. And we dig deeper into, what is the role of a leader. And now we are talking about the evolutionary steps which we will have to take in order to kind of reach there. So first, one of the important aspects of continuous delivery integrations is also standardizations and definitions. So continuous delivery is still evolving paradigm. It comprises of architectural capabilities, for example, or deployment models or service models, and even, some aspects of business operations. So how the basic definitions would evolve from here, if you're not paying attention to what is happening in the continuous delivery space. Continuous Delivery Foundation has created a reference architecture for continuous delivery. So that can be one of the starting points for standardization. I also foresee that some of the standardization efforts would translate into design patterns. Design patterns are like when you implement CI/CD at scale, and that is a proven model. So that becomes some kind of a design pattern for us to follow. So reference architecture is a higher abstraction layer, and then we can also build upon that story and see the CI/CD design patterns evolving from there. We also see translation of security requirements and policies across cloud offering, for example, and interoperability is another big theme or big thing for the evolution of continuous delivery, like how this translation of specific applications or service functionality would happen from, let's say, one cloud or one environment to other. There are a number of standardization bodies and regulations and frameworks which are steadily growing. And there is, like, starting from NIST, for example, they have come up with some basic definitions. TM Forum is another organization who also fosters that kind of standardization. Open Grid Forum, European Telecommunication Standard Institute, IEEE, and many others, and not overseeing the fact that CNCF and CDF, the effort which we are doing in order to kind of embrace open source technology and also build some kind of standardized definitions around the ecosystem, is also very interesting. If you go further, the next slide, I think we also see the induction or influence of generative AI capabilities into software delivery landscape. And we are not overseeing that, and we can talk a little bit more about how CI/CD would be influenced by generative AI, and what are the kind of here and now kind of use cases where you can start to kind of experiment, implement. And we are already seeing that the injection of generative AI in every like tool space, for example, is kind of coming along. A larger or a long short kind of a time frame when you can see introduction of AI agents, for example, their software development agents or product management or software support agents, even research agents would work with you, and some kind of a agent management framework will be available for governing all this, right? So again, continuous delivery would be having a vital role to play in this whole kind of story which is building up. And initial investment for developing or training or integrating these AI systems into software development is a substantial kind of effort, which calls upon a lot of communities and open source initiatives and leaders, for example, to invest time and even bandwidth of their own resources to kind of see how this can shape up. And this is, to me, I think it's a very exciting time to be a software development professional or practitioner or leader, because we are defining how the continuous delivery landscape could look like in 5 years from now. So, how we build that governance, how do we maintain or update or train our AI systems? It is all up to us. And of course, we need to have a very, very focused contribution into this space, because this is like building something for future. Now, again, I do the long shot and then I give it back to Paweł for some kind of immediate next steps. So, Paweł, what can happen from an immediate next steps, and how do you foresee like the translation happening with the injection of generative AI into CI/CD?
Sure. So first of all, with AI, we are not there yet. With CI/CD, we are in the same place which we already saw, for example, for infrastructure as code, or well, agile, really. So we realized that this infancy time for those approaches are ending, and now we are facing huge challenges. Like, for example, how to properly use Terraform or other infrastructure as code tool for multiple environments and really big infrastructure. The same is with CI/CD, how to approach to CI/CD with this changing world where we start to use CI/CD not like on the beginning of DevOps, where we try to bring closer development and operation. From that time, DevOps become a much bigger beast, and the same happens with CI/CD, right? And now we are going there with AI, I think, faster than previously, but still we are going there, and we will start to understand that, first of all, AI is not something what will, let's say, remove human equation from the picture, because it's always that way, right? So okay, maybe AI will take the job of 5 developers, but it will need 6 people to maintain it. So still there will be a job, but AI for sure will change the picture in the terms of analyze of the delivery, or of the maintaining of the delivery, properly identify the bottlenecks, properly identify the ways how to improve something, and even proactively tell us that something should be taken into consideration, right? So no, AI will not rewrite the code in the pipeline, no, but AI will help us to understand better how we deliver and how good or bad we are in this delivery, right? And the power here is, and I have to say that the power here is that AI will be like independent judge. Because if we are judging our own pipelines, we are judging those pipelines throughout our like perspective, and we always try to justify some things, right? AI will just look on the reality and tell us what is there. Of course, then it's our decision what to do with that. This is very important as well. So I think that still, even if I'm not the big fan of putting AI everywhere, I think AI is a huge thing for the continuous delivery approach at all. So for the next slide, we have couple of like links which can help you to understand a little bit better what can AI do for us in this space of CI/CD. But also we have to remember about one very important element. I mentioned this airbag on in some place, right? So it is part of the security approach. We have to remember about security and how we approach to AI in scope of security, because we heard a couple of times already after the ChatGPT boom that some people asked ChatGPT about things which shouldn't be asked somewhere, shouldn't go outside the walls, right? And they did, really. And of course, we can say, but ChatGPT is secured, right? Well, with all due respect, we don't know, right? So probably you will not put your credit card information or your I don't know insurance information to ChatGPT because you don't want to do it. So why you do it with the sensitive information from a company? So that's why we need to also understand how to use and how to bring AI capabilities into our organizations. This is very important. How we will teach our AI, what kind of knowledge this AI should have. Because let's be straight here, the AI is as smart as stupid is its developer. Right? So depends on the data, on how the data is prepared, how the data is delivered, how the data is consumed by this AI. This is what you will have on the end. That's why your models, your AI approach will be also subject of CI/CD because it will be developed. So, well, now we have this chicken or egg thing, right? But still, AI will be very important and more important, and AI will help us also to bring closer the CI/CD as this something what is still seen as a gap between development and operations, between development and business. Maybe this is better, not development and operation, but development and business, right? Because this will give also the understanding, the better understanding to the whole organization, how the delivery really works.
Yeah. So we have come to the end of this conversation. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Obviously, this is again a teaser because we, like me and Paweł, have done these workshops for a day and it was not enough. We also play games during the workshop, which is not possible here in the setup with the limited time. But what I was,
With this beautiful
discussing.
help.
And what we were discussing with CM and the CDF team, that we probably would like to have an opportunity to do it for a longer extent where we can cover more topics, right? So hopefully that would work in the near future. But over to you, CM, for if you have any questions in the chat or any other follow-ups which we have to do.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the very detailed and very precise and very concise deep dive into some of the challenges organization, communities, and individuals are facing day to day. I think they get a very good grasp of it from the things we actually had discussed. We have seen this is happening all the time as well. So I think I haven't seen some question in the chat as well. And the good news is that this recording will be available on the Continuous Delivery Foundation YouTube channels. You can actually ask that as well. And even though if you have, after watching or recapping this webinar, if you have some question, you can put them on the YouTube chat as well, and we will try to answer those in there as well. But that's a very wonderful and concise depth into some of the topic as well. So as Garima says, I think there should be a need for part 2 or some other webinar in the near future as well, because what I see is the topic continuous delivery, DevOps, open source. This is not a planet. This is actually a galaxy. So the galaxy needs more time to, because it has so many moving pieces, so many planets inside it, and there's some time in the galaxy there's a black hole is there as well. So that's mean you have so much more time to convey. Yes, absolutely. So this means we have to give it a more time to that as well. But I think I've learned a lot during the conversation as well. So I think you highlight some of the very good topic to the conversation as well. As you mentioned, I think open source is playing a very vital role, and the foundation like CDF who actually owning some of the open source project and making sure it stay vendor neutral and it's adhere to the community guidelines, and the people are actually working with the communities has actually get benefited from it as well. That's a very good news to for the folks as well. But I think we are top of the hour, unfortunately, unfortunately we don't have time to cover some question in there as well. But I hope you guys enjoy the conversation, and we will love to hear some of your feedback on this as well. And if you happen to be in the continuous delivery Slack channel, so I think we try to cover those answers. If you have still got, we try to cover those as well. So my learning objective from this webinar today is that the key takeaways is that you need to include a culture of continuous improvement and the right tool chain to enable seamless delivery, and data-driven metrics that guide decision making will help your organization be successfully implementing CD to reduce the time to market and product quality, enhance team productivity as well. But with that, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And if anybody watching to us right now, they are happy to give a talk at the CD Foundation workshop. Link is available somewhere in the YouTube. You can click on it, submit a session for us, and then we review it out and we will touch base with you and we'll try to make sure your voice will be heard, and we will schedule some time with you so you can present the session, some webinar with us on this YouTube channel as well. With that, thank you very much for everyone attending the webinar. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to meeting you again soon in the near future as well. Thank you, Garima. Thank you, Paweł. It's been pleasure meeting you, and I'm really appreciated all this time you've spent with us on this YouTube channel. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.